Love coffee but not sure if coffee is good or bad for diabetes? Then stay tuned, because I'm sharing how coffee and caffeine impact your blood sugar and how much, if any, you can have each day. Hey everybody, Erin here with Healthy Mom, Happy Family, and I am so happy to have you join me here for my new series, Can I Eat That with Diabetes? And I can't wait to kick off this video on coffee, because two of the most common questions I get asked are, can I drink coffee with diabetes, and will caffeine raise my blood sugar? And I know this topic is really confusing because if you listen to the news or you talk to other healthcare professionals, you're gonna hear good and bad things about both. Sometimes they say drinking coffee with diabetes is beneficial, and other times you hear that drinking coffee with diabetes can spike blood sugar. So that's why I wanted to make this video today, to really clear up all the confusion. So in today's video, this is what I'm gonna be talking about. I'm gonna tell you if coffee is in fact good for diabetes. I'm gonna share with you the impact of caffeine on blood sugar. And finally, I'm gonna tell you if you can safely consume caffeine when you have type 2 diabetes. So let's get started. Now, before we dive in, I just want to remind you that if you are working to prevent type 2 diabetes or are managing type 2 diabetes, I would love for you to hit that notification bell and subscribe today so you never miss new tips, tricks, and recipes. All right, so let's get started, because I am sure you are staring right now at your pot of coffee and you desperately want to have a cup, but you're not sure if you can have it. So I don't want you to wait any longer. I want you to know what are the facts when it comes to coffee and diabetes. And the truth is really there's positives and there's negatives too. And that's why this topic is really confusing. So I wanted to talk about one of the potential negatives first. And this is about caffeine, because caffeine may raise blood sugar levels. Now, when you think about coffee, coffee is one of the biggest sources of caffeine in our diets. So it's really important to understand the impact caffeine can have on your blood sugar levels. Now, for many people, having caffeine can raise blood sugar. And the reason for this is because when we have caffeine, it increases cortisol in our body. Now, what cortisol is it's a stress hormone, and it's really central to our fight or flight response in our body. So when our body releases cortisol, it's basically signaling to the body to start to bring more sugar into the bloodstream. That way you have quick acting energy if you need to act on that fight and flee response to any kind of stressful situation. So anything that elevates your cortisol levels is also going to elevate your blood sugar, and caffeine's no different. But what's really important to note though is that if you drink caffeine regularly, so if you constantly have caffeine on a regular basis and you're kind of building up a tolerance to it, your body tends to produce smaller amounts of cortisol to this caffeine. So if you are somebody who's been having caffeinated beverages for a long time, you might notice a very small impact on blood sugar. Whereas if you're someone who doesn't ever have caffeine and you have it one day, you might see a much bigger blood sugar response. Okay, now remember, we are all individuals and everybody's going to respond to caffeine differently when it comes to blood sugar, which is why testing is so important, right? Because you might have a varied response. But I'm just gonna go over with you in today's video what could potentially result from caffeine in coffee, and make sure you are doing your homework by testing your blood sugar to see how you really respond. Okay, so now that you know that caffeine could potentially raise blood sugar, let's talk about how much caffeine is too much. Okay, so in the majority of people who don't have diabetes, the upper limit for caffeine is usually about 400 milligrams per day. So this is what we consider the general safe range, and it doesn't seem to have a significant impact on blood sugar. But when you have diabetes, things can be a little bit different. So for people with diabetes, some research has shown that you want to keep this amount lower. The more caffeine you have, the more it increases the risk of high blood sugar levels. So people with diabetes, generally, we want to keep it to 200 milligrams per day or less. The other negative impact of caffeine too is it could potentially make you more insulin resistant if you already have diabetes. So now we have kind of this double whammy where caffeine can be elevating blood sugar and making you more insulin resistant. So that's where we really have to be cautious with how much caffeine you're having so that you don't see this difficulty in maintaining healthy blood sugar levels just because you're drinking a caffeinated beverage. Now, something that you want to think about with caffeine too is that your tolerance and even the impact caffeine has on your blood sugar is going to be different really based on your own genetics, because some people just naturally metabolize caffeine quicker than others. And so those who metabolize caffeine more slowly tend to be the same people who experience more blood sugar shifts after consuming caffeine. So you can kind of see when you test your own blood sugar what category you might fall into. Now, one other thing we don't always think about with caffeine is the impact it can have on sleep. And this is really, really important because for some people, if they have any kind of caffeinated beverage during the day, they see a negative impact on sleep. So they might sleep less or the quality of sleep is poor. And if you have diabetes, I want you to be aware of this because poor sleep quality can also increase insulin resistance. And if you have diabetes, you drink caffeinated beverages, what I would suggest is if you really want to continue to have some caffeine, make sure you limit it to the mornings and early afternoon and try to leave about a 6-8 hour window before bedtime so it doesn't have a negative impact on sleep. Okay, so let's talk about how much caffeine can you have with diabetes. And as I mentioned before, everything with diabetes really comes down to you're an individual and everybody responds a little bit differently. But there is kind of this safe threshold that we seem to feel doesn't have as great of an impact on blood sugar. So some people with diabetes, even a small amount of caffeine, they see blood sugar go up. And so in those situations, probably the best to avoid it altogether. But for other people with diabetes, we do see that up to about 200 milligrams per day tends to not have much of an impact on blood sugar levels. In general, once you go above that, so anywhere from 200 to 500 milligrams of caffeine per day, that's where we start to see increases in blood sugar and also an increase in insulin resistance in people who have diabetes. So if you are going to drink anything caffeinated, you're best to stay under that 200 milligram range. And then of course, test your blood sugar, see how you respond, because you might need to keep that range even a little lower based on your individual response. And if you have any questions on this, of course, talk with your physician, talk with your diabetes care team, your dietitian, because they're going to help you to really determine how much, if any, is appropriate for you based on your blood sugar response when you have anything with caffeine. Okay, so let's talk more about coffee itself, specifically the caffeine in coffee, right? Because I talked with you about caffeine, I talked about the impact it can have on blood sugar, so you really have to think about how much caffeine is in your coffee. Now, with coffee, it can vary depending on how you prepare it. So if we just look at general 1 cup of brewed coffee, 8 ounces, it has about 95 milligrams of caffeine per cup. But things like espresso, a shot of espresso has 64 milligrams. Instant coffee is a little lower. Per 8 ounces, you get 62 milligrams. Cold brew coffee is higher, about 12 ounces there is 155 milligrams. And if you do a latte, it can range anywhere from about 60 to 120 milligrams. So you can see there's thresholds. But remember, if we're talking about just that cup of coffee, 8 ounces is a cup. 8 ounces, not the huge coffee, right? So if you're getting this large coffee from the coffee shop, which is 2-3 cups, you gotta double or triple the amount of caffeine. So if you're having 3 large cups of coffee, that's very different than someone who's having 3 actual 8-ounce cups of coffee when it comes to caffeine and diabetes and blood sugar management. So it really depends, on the coffee that you choose, on the caffeine content, how it's going to impact your blood sugar. Okay, so if you choose a smaller portion, you choose a coffee that's brewed so it has less caffeine, there's probably going to be less of an impact on your blood sugar. Now, coffee though does have potential benefits. But the thing that's really interesting is that you do find benefits when it comes to diabetes from coffee, whether it is caffeinated or decaf. Okay, research has actually shown that drinking black coffee may lower the risk of type 2 diabetes. And we don't really know why exactly yet, but the thought is that coffee is actually really rich in nutrients. It's really rich in antioxidants, and it contains a lot of nutrients like B vitamins and magnesium and chromium and potassium. So we think that the combinations of these nutrients are really what gives it the health benefits. And it might just be that coffee is rich enough in these nutrients that it can offset some of the negative impacts of caffeine on blood sugar. Now, when you think about what is the best coffee for someone who has diabetes, you want to get the health benefits of coffee, but you don't want the potential negative impact on blood sugar, right? So decaffeinated coffee can be a great choice because you're really removing that potential impact of blood sugar rising from caffeine. When you think about decaffeinated coffee per cup, per 8 ounces, it only has 2 milligrams of caffeine. So really, really little caffeine in it. It's not going to impact your blood sugar. And you still get all those same beneficial nutrients. But if you do want to have caffeinated coffee, portions are important because we don't want to exceed that 200 milligrams a day, which generally speaking is about 16 ounces of coffee. And you want to think about the time that you're having it. No closer than 6 to 8 hours before bedtime so it doesn't impact your sleep. Also want you to think about the type of coffee. Okay, if you have sweetened coffees, coffee beverages that have flavorings in them, iced coffee, anything that's adding a lot of sugar or even added fats and creamers, these things can have a significant impact on your blood sugar and your health. Even creamers add a lot of fat, saturated fat. Now that won't impact blood sugar directly, but we know adding a large amount of saturated fat to the diet can make you more insulin resistant and make it harder to manage blood sugar. On top of that, more saturated fat in the diet, of course, can increase the risk of cardiovascular disease, which we know when you have diabetes, you're already at a greater risk for. So less is better when it comes to added fat in the coffee. And sugar you have to watch out for. Flavored coffees can be one of the biggest sources of added sugar in the diet. So try to avoid all added sugar in your coffee. Black coffee, or if you want to flavor your coffee, some really great ways to do so are use things that are already sugar-free that add flavor, like a sprinkle of cinnamon. Cinnamon, and I'll link to the video below, I did a video on cinnamon and blood sugar, but having more cinnamon in your diet can actually benefit blood sugar, can make you, can increase insulin sensitivity, so it's a really great choice, and it's a great way to flavor your coffee as well. So skip the added sugar, try the cinnamon, and go light with the creamer. Choose low-fat milk if you can, so we don't have a lot of added sugars and added saturated fat in your coffee. If you get your coffee from a coffee shop and you're not sure what's in it, go to their website, especially if it's a chain, they will have the nutrition facts content, or you can ask them what's going into it, but you want to make sure you know how much sugar, how much fat, and of course how much caffeine is in the coffee that you're drinking. Okay, so let's talk about what is the bottom line when it comes to coffee and diabetes. So basically, whether you choose to consume caffeinated or decaffeinated coffee, that's up to you and your diabetes care team too to see what's the best choice for you. Coffee though can have potential benefits when it comes to managing diabetes, and you do not have to give up coffee when you have diabetes, but you do have to make sure you're making the best choice for you. So when you choose coffee, decaffeinated is best, but if you do have caffeinated coffee, try not to exceed 200 milligrams per day. And make sure you're avoiding coffee that have added sugars and added fats so it has the least impact on blood sugar. But most important across everything else is when you do have coffee, see how your body responds by checking your blood sugar. The more often you check your blood sugar to see your response, the better you can see how you as an individual respond to coffee with diabetes management. So what do you think? Let me know. Do you drink coffee with diabetes? How's your blood sugar respond? Do you have to stick with decaffeinated, or are you able to tolerate some caffeine? And do you notice a difference in your blood sugar? I want to know. Let me know, comment below. I can't wait to hear from you. And let me know what you think about this series too. What other foods do you want me to focus on and answer that question? Can I eat that with diabetes? Let me know. And if you liked today's video, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss new tips, tricks, and recipes. Thanks for joining me.